July 1483. The sound is the first thing. Children laughing. The sharp, splintering thwack of wooden practice swords. This is the Tower of London, but for a moment it's just a yard. And they are just boys. To the world, they are King Edward V, age 12, and his brother, Richard, Duke of York, age 9. They are the blood. They are the future of England. But inside these stone walls, they are not kings. They are prisoners. An Italian visitor, Dominic Mancini, is in London at this exact moment. He is watching. He writes in a private report, a report later buried for centuries, that the boys were moved, withdrawn, into the inner chambers of the tower. He describes the young King Edward standing at a high window, no longer playing. Mancini wrote that the boy was desperately begging for forgiveness for his sins. And then Mancini gives us the line, the breadcrumb that history chose to ignore. He writes that the boys began to appear like victims prepared for sacrifice. Then, nothing. Silence. They are not seen at the window again. They are not seen in the yard. 2 boys, the most powerful children in Europe, vanish from the historical record. No funeral, no obituary, no body. Now, stop. The story you think you know, the one you were taught, is simple. It's clean. It was written 30 years later by Sir Thomas More, and then perfected, canonized by William Shakespeare. You know this story. The official story is this. An evil, deformed tyrant, their uncle, Richard III. He steals the throne. Fearing a rebellion, he orders his henchman, one James Tyrrell, to go to the boy's chamber in the dead of night.
2 men enter. They smother the sleeping princes with their own pillows. A straightforward political murder. A tragedy. An act of ambition. That is the lie. It's a lie because the facts, the hard, documented facts, tell a completely different story. A story that is stranger, darker, and far more complex than a simple nursery rhyme crime. If you are an investigator, you don't look at the story. You look at the behavior. And the behavior of everyone involved. It makes no sense. Let's start with the mother, Elizabeth Woodville. Her 2 sons are allegedly murdered in the tower. She is in hiding, in sanctuary. What does a grieving, terrified mother do?
Here is what she doesn't do. She doesn't raise an army. She doesn't send letters to the Pope. She doesn't scream for the heads of her enemies. No. The records show something else. Something cold. In March of 1484, just months after her sons were supposedly suffocated, Elizabeth Woodville makes a public oath. A promise. She agrees to leave sanctuary and deliver her other children, her 5 daughters, including the heir to the entire Yorkist claim, Elizabeth of York, into the hands and into the court of the very man accused of the murders, Richard III. This is the Christmas Pact. It's a documented historical fact. Why would a mother, any mother, hand her remaining precious daughters over to the man who just butchered her sons? unless she didn't believe they were dead. Or unless she knew something worse, something that forced her into a terrible bargain. A pact to save the children she had left. That's anomaly number 1. Here's anomaly number 2. The victor, Henry Tudor. The man who becomes King Henry VII. In 1485, he defeats and kills Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth. He wins the crown. He is the enemy of Richard. Now, what is the first thing you do when you defeat a tyrant? You expose his crimes. You find the bodies of the princes. You give them a state funeral. You hold up their bones and show the world why your enemy had to be destroyed. It is the greatest propaganda gift in history. What did Henry VII do? He did the opposite. He did not investigate. He did not prosecute. He did not find the bodies. Instead, Henry VII, the founder of the Tudor dynasty, systematically erased the case. One of his first acts as king was to find the titulus regius, the very law Richard III had passed to declare the princes illegitimate, and he ordered it destroyed. He declared it was to be removed from the roll, burnt, and utterly destroyed. He made it illegal to even own a copy, on pain of death. Why? Why would the man who hated Richard not want the world to see the very document that proved Richard's motive for murder? You don't burn evidence you need. You burn evidence that implicates you. Or evidence that reveals a secret you cannot allow to be told. So now, let's look at the board. The mother of the victims makes a pact with the alleged killer. The killer's greatest enemy takes the throne and continues the cover-up. This is not the behavior of a simple murder investigation. This is the behavior of a conspiracy. The official story, the one about the pillows, is a lie. It's a neat, tidy, simple solution, designed to stop you from asking the real question. The question is not, who killed the princes? The question is, what truth, what dark, terrible, unifying secret was so horrifying that two mortal enemies, the House of York and the House of Tudor, agreed to bury it together? This is not a story about a murder. This is the story of a dark pact. And to understand the terms of that pact, we must first understand the world that created it. A world that is not our own. A world of chaos, blood, and magic. To understand the pact, you have to understand the world of 1483. You have to forget everything you know about law, science, and reason. This is not our world. This is a world 30 years deep into a meat grinder. The Wars of the Roses. Think of it. The crown, the symbol of God's will on earth, had changed hands 5 times in 3 decades. Kings were not anointed. They were made, and unmade, on muddy fields with axes and pikes. The aristocracy was a graveyard. Loyalty was a word people used while calculating the precise moment to betray. This chaos is the air they breathe. And royal blood, the very thing they are fighting over, has never been more valuable. And never been cheaper.
When King Edward IV dies suddenly in 1483,
He doesn't just leave a 12-year-old son to take the throne. He leaves a vacuum, and into this vacuum steps his brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Richard is a military man. He is a hardened veteran of the northern frontier. He understands one thing: power. He knows that a 12-year-old boy, his nephew, Edward V, cannot hold the shattered kingdom together. He sees enemies on all sides, especially the boy's maternal family, the Woodvilles, who he views as power-hungry upstarts. So, in this world of absolute political instability, Richard's move to take the throne, to declare the boy king illegitimate, this is brutal. This is ruthless. But in the context of the Wars of the Roses, it is logical. It is standard operating procedure. But the political chaos is only one half of the equation. It's the other half, the part history books leave out, that allows the Dark Pact to exist. We have to look at the mind of the 15th century. In the 15th century, science as we know it does not exist. There is no line between medicine and magic. There is no line between astronomy and astrology. There is no line between a physician and a sorcerer. A university-trained doctor examining a patient would check their star chart just as readily as their pulse. A scholar, like the famous George Ripley, a contemporary of these events, was not just a poet. He was a canon at Bridlington, and he was one of England's most famous alchemists, dedicating his life to finding the lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone. This is the world of our characters, a world where men believe, with absolute certainty, that base metal can be turned into gold, that an elixir of life can grant immortality. And in this world, this blend of high ritual and proto-science, certain substances are believed to hold immense power. Mercury, antimony, and above all, blood. The blood of a king was not just biological fluid. It was a divine conduit. It was the blood royal, a substance infused with God's own grace. And the blood of an innocent, especially an innocent king, was considered the most potent reagent on earth. It was believed to have properties that could heal the sick, secure a bloodline, or even, in some circles, transfer power. Now hold that thought. The idea of a world driven by this strange, dark, alchemical logic. Let's reintroduce the players on our board, not as historical figures, but as components in this machine. First, the victims, the reagents. Edward V, 12 years old. By all accounts, a brilliant, educated, pious boy. And his brother, Richard, Duke of York, 9 years old. The spare. 2 innocent vessels of the most powerful blood on the planet. Then, the system, the alchemists. This is not one man. This is the machine of the state itself. The alleged killer, Richard III, a man desperate for legitimacy, a man who needs to solidify his claim to the throne, not just with armies, but with divine right. The grieving mother, Elizabeth Woodville, a woman known to be deeply superstitious, a woman whose own mother, Jacquetta, was literally put on trial for witchcraft, a woman desperate to protect her remaining bloodline. And finally, the man who inherits the experiment, Henry VII, a usurper with the shakiest claim of all, a man who needs to create a new dynasty and ensure that whatever dark ritual was performed in that tower stays buried. This is the context, A political crisis mixed with a profound, terrifying belief in the medical and magical properties of royal blood. This is the world that makes the Dark Pact possible. The official documents, the ones that survive, they don't lie. But they tell a story that is deeply, fundamentally wrong. If you're building a case, you follow the paper trail, and our paper trail begins with the first great anomaly. We call it the Christmas Pact. Remember, Richard III has taken the throne. He has passed a law, the Titulus Regius, declaring his nephews, the princes, to be illegitimate. This is Exhibit A. He's a man using Parliament, using law to secure his power. He isn't just a brute in the dark. He is a politician. He is making his actions legal. But this law is what supposedly provides the motive for the murder. He has declared them bastards. Now he must erase them. This is the Tudor story. But then the paper trail goes cold. We have no record of their deaths, no order for an execution, no payment to an assassin. Instead, we have the opposite. We have a record. A public record. From March 1484. The Christmas Pact. Let's understand this document. Elizabeth Woodville, the boy's mother, is in hiding. She is in a sacred sanctuary where Richard's men cannot touch her or her daughters. She has one card left to play. Her daughters. Especially the eldest, Elizabeth of York, who her supporters want to marry to the rival claimant, Henry Tudor. Richard III knows this. He needs to neutralize that threat. So, he negotiates. He sends a public promise, a vow, on his honor as a king, that if Elizabeth and her daughters come out of sanctuary and come to his court, they will be safe. They will be honored. They will be treated as his kinswomen. And what does Elizabeth Woodville do? This mother, whose two sons are supposedly rotting in a shallow grave on Richard's orders. She agrees. She leaves sanctuary. She makes a public oath of loyalty to Richard. And she hands her daughters, her only remaining assets, over to him. They join his court. They attend his feasts. They wear the clothes he buys them. This one act, this Christmas pact, shatters the official story. It is the most irrational, illogical act of a grieving mother in history. Or it is the most logical act of a woman who has just signed a contract. A woman who knows her sons are not dead, but are part of a different, more terrible bargain. A woman who, to save her daughters from the same fate, agrees to the terms of the Dark Pact. She agrees to be silent. Now, let's look at the second and perhaps more damning piece of paper, the one that isn't there. August 22nd, 1485, the Battle of Bosworth. Richard III, after a desperate charge, is cut down. His crown is found in a thorn bush. Henry Tudor, a Welsh nobleman with a thin, watery claim to the throne, becomes King Henry VII. He is the savior, the man who has liberated England from the tyrant. His entire claim to the throne rests on the idea that Richard was an illegitimate monster. And what is the number one Exhibit A proof of Richard's monstrosity? The murder of his innocent nephews. Henry's propaganda machine, even before the battle, had been screaming about this. So, upon taking the throne, his first order of business must be to prove it. He must find the bodies. He must dig up the tower. He must call James Tyrrell, the alleged killer, to a public trial and have him confess. He must give the princes a magnificent state funeral, parading their coffins through London to show the people what they were saved from. This is not just justice, it is politics. It is the cement that would secure his new, fragile dynasty. Henry VII did none of that. He never opened an investigation. He never searched the tower. He never prosecuted anyone for the crime. He captured James Tyrrell, the supposed assassin, and employed him. He gave him royal commissions. But most tellingly of all, he dealt with the titulus regius, that law Richard had passed, the one declaring the boys bastards. This was Henry's proof of Richard's motive. He should have nailed it to every church door in England. Instead, in his very first parliament, Henry Tudor had the titulus regius repealed and then destroyed. He ordered all existing copies to be found, burnt, and utterly destroyed. He made it illegal to possess. You do not burn the proof of your enemy's guilt. You burn the proof of your own. The behavior of the mother, Elizabeth Woodville, is illogical. The behavior of the victor, Henry VII, is illogical. Unless they are both parties to the same agreement. Henry Tudor, by marrying the boy's sister, Elizabeth of York, became the beneficiary of the Dark Pact. He needed the boys gone just as much as Richard did. And he, like Richard, and like the boy's own mother, needed the truth of what happened to them. The method. To remain a secret. The paper trail has led us to a dead end. We have established a conspiracy, but we don't know the crime. To find that, we have to leave the official records. We must look at the human element, the ordeal itself. We must go back inside the tower and examine the only witness who was there, the one who saw it all happen. We have no letters from the princes. We have no diaries. The tower's internal records from that summer are conveniently missing. We have only one voice, one man who was there, outside, watching, listening. Dominic Mancini, an Italian cleric and political observer visiting London. He was not part of the English power structure. He had no side in this fight. He was just a witness. He wrote his report in late 1483, just months after the disappearance, before any of the official Tudor stories had been created. His report is the purest, most contemporary source we have. And it is terrifying. Mancini describes how the boys, after first being seen playing in the tower gardens, were gradually withdrawn, deeper and deeper into the stone fortress. First, they were no longer seen in the garden, then no longer in the outer courtyards. Finally, Mancini reports, they were seen only at the windows before they disappeared altogether. This is not a sudden, violent act. This is a process, a slow, methodical, psychological isolation, a turning of the screw. Mancini's most chilling details are about the boy king, Edward V. He writes that Edward was like a lamb in the midst of wolves. He understood his uncle had betrayed him. He understood he was a prisoner. And then, Mancini tells us. The boy king began to think about his sins. This is the 18+ detail that everyone misses. It's not about violence. It's about psychology. The boy is 12 years old. He is not a soldier. He is a pious, educated child, and in his terror he has been convinced, perhaps by a priest, perhaps by his own uncle, that what is happening to him is his fault. He is desperately begging for forgiveness. This is not the behavior of a boy awaiting an assassination. This is the behavior of a victim being psychologically groomed. Mancini adds one more detail. As the isolation became total, only one person was allowed routine access to the prince. Not his mother, not his guards, not his courtiers. The doctor, Mancini writes. A physician who the boy trusted. A doctor. The one man who could enter and leave. The one man who could administer medicine. The one man who could monitor the victim, prepare the patient, and report back. This is where we must stop being historians and start being investigators. We must build the theory of the crime. The official story, the one about the pillows, is clean, fast, and political. It fails to explain the Christmas Pact. It fails to explain Henry VII's cover-up. It fails to explain the mother's silence. But a different scenario, a dark pact, explains everything. Let's propose our own theory. A theory grounded in the 15th century mind. What if the princes were not murdered? What if they were used? What if the goal was not to kill them, but to harvest something from them? What if this was not an assassination, but a procedure? This is our 18+ hypothesis. The Dark Pact. Imagine the scene. Not a midnight assassination, but a clinical, medical, alchemical ritual. The tower is not a prison. It is a laboratory. The doctor Mancini mentioned is not a healer. He is the lead technician. The boys, psychologically groomed into believing this is for their own good, for the good of the realm, or as penance for their sins, are brought, one by one, to this chamber. This is not a hot-blooded crime. It is cold. It is sterile. It is scientific, by their standards. The goal? Perhaps to cure a sick royal, perhaps to conduct a dark alchemical ritual to transfer the divine right of their bloodline to Richard III's own sickly son. We can imagine the scene, based on medical texts of the Lock 1 time. The phlebotomy. The drawing of blood. Not to kill, but to collect. The application of strange poultices. The chanting of Latin, blurring the line between prayer and incantation. This is the terror. The boys are not killed in their sleep. They are awake. They are alive, and they are participating in their own destruction, managed by a trusted physician. A crime like this, a medical, ritualistic, semi-religious atrocity, this would explain the behavior. It explains Elizabeth Woodville's Christmas Pact. Richard comes to her and says, "I did not kill your sons. They are gone. They were sacrificed for the good of the realm. Be silent, and your daughters will be spared. A mother, faced with this unspeakable occult truth, would make that bargain. It explains Henry VII's cover-up. He inherits the throne. He learns what was done in that tower. How does he, the new king, explain to the world that his predecessors were engaged in dark alchemy and the ritualistic abuse of children? He can't. It's not a crime he can prosecute. It is a heresy. It is a stain on the crown itself. So he burns the records. He marries the boy's sister. And he continues the Pact of Silence. The official murder story, the one by Thomas More, was created 30 years later, precisely to cover up this more horrifying truth. It was a simple, clean, political lie. To replace a complex, ritualistic, unspeakable reality. This dark, alchemical, ritualistic abuse is the very core of our investigation. But a crime this perfect, this deeply buried, creates a problem. How do you investigate something that was systematically erased and then replaced with a lie? You have to investigate the liar. This brings us to our first B-story lead. He's not a detective. He's the man who built the cover-up. His name is Sir Thomas More. You know him as a saint, a martyr, the man for all seasons. But in 1513, when he sat down to write the history of King Richard III, he was a rising lawyer and politician. He was not a historian. He was a propagandist. More was not a contemporary. He was only 5 years old when the princes disappeared. He was writing this history for his patrons, the Tudors, and his primary source for the entire story, the man who gave him the juicy details, was John Morton. Who was John Morton? Only Richard III's single most bitter mortal enemy. A man Richard had imprisoned, a man who had fled to France and joined Henry Tudor's invasion force. So, the official story, the one that has defined this case for 500 years, is second-hand information from the primary enemy of the accused, written 30 years later by a man working for the new regime. In a court of law, this would be thrown out in 5 minutes. In the court of history, it became gospel. Why? Because More's story, the story of the evil uncle and the pillows, is brilliant. It's simple. It's emotionally resonant. It has a clear villain, innocent victims, and a clean motive. It's the perfect lie. It was created precisely to replace the messy, complex, and horrifying truth. The truth of the dark pact. The truth of a ritual that implicated everyone was too dangerous. So they created a simple murder and laid it all at the feet of the one man who was conveniently dead and couldn't defend himself. Richard III. Thomas More wasn't a historian. He was a narrative architect. He was the cleaner. His job was to build a wall of stone over the truth. And for 500 years, that wall has stood. Until now. But to break that wall, you need a different kind of investigator. Not a politician, but a detective. This brings us to our second B-story lead. She is not from the 15th century. She is here, now. Her name is Philippa Langley. You may have heard of her. She is the investigator who, in 2012, against all academic and historical advice, led the team that found the lost skeleton of Richard III, buried under a parking lot in Leicester. Langley is not a traditional historian. She is an investigator. She follows the evidence, no matter how cold the trail, no matter how absurd the establishment says she is. She proved them all wrong once. Now she has turned her attention to the other great mystery, the Missing Princes Project. Her investigation starts from a place of deep skepticism. She does not believe the Tudor lie. She does not believe the pillow story. Her working hypothesis is different. She believes the princes were not killed. She believes they were smuggled out of the tower and sent into exile. Her investigation, our B story, is a modern-day cold case. We follow her team. They are not digging in the tower. They are in the archives. They are in Bruges. They are in Lille. They are in the municipal records of the Netherlands. They are looking for a paper trail, a payment, a letter, a mention in a merchant's log. They are chasing the ghosts of 2 boys. They find whispers, mentions of the boys from England, rumors of a prince in hiding. But these are the same rumors that give rise to pretenders like Perkin Warbeck. They are not a solid paper trail. They are echoes. Every document they uncover, every lead they follow, it evaporates. The leads evaporate because a perfect conspiracy plans for them to. A merchant's log in Bruges mentions 2 English lords, but the dates are wrong. A letter in France speaks of Edward's bastard son, but it leads nowhere. Philippa Langley's investigation is heroic, but it runs into the same wall that every investigator has. The wall built by Henry VII. Think of the completeness of that erasure. The Titulus Regius, the founding document of the conspiracy, burned. The internal tower records for that summer vanished. The personal journals and letters of the court purged. Henry VII's 24-year reign was a long, slow, meticulous cleansing of the historical record. He, his mother, Margaret Beaufort, and his inner circle of cleaners, like John Morton, had almost a quarter century to find and destroy every stray piece of paper. So now, we have a cold case with 3 impossible options. Theory 1, the Tudor lie, the pillow murder. It's simple, it's clean, but it's contradicted by the behavior of the mother and the victor. It doesn't fit the facts. Theory 2, the escape. Philippa Langley's theory. It's hopeful, but it relies on a lack of evidence, on whispers and ghosts that can't be proven. It is a theory built on silence. Theory 3, the Dark Pact. Our 18+ hypothesis. The ritual of abuse. This theory explains all the behavior. It explains the mother's silence, the victor's cover-up, the doctor's access, the victim's psychological collapse. It fits every fact, but it has one fatal flaw. A secret that dark. An alchemical, state-sponsored ritual would be the most guarded secret of all. It would have no paper trail. It would have been an oath of blood, punishable by the most horrific death. So, all 3 roads lead to the same place. A dead end. The files have been burned. The witnesses are dust. The liars, Thomas More and the Tudor machine have won. The wall they built in 1513 is perfect. It seems the perfect crime does exist. Unless the conspirators, in their rush to erase the written record, in their focus on destroying every piece of parchment, unless they forgot about the physical record. The investigation cannot be in the archives. The archives are a lie. The investigation must be in the ground. The case is cold. It's 500 years cold. The paper trail is a lie. The escape theory is a ghost hunt. The dark pact is a perfect, untraceable conspiracy. The investigation is over. Until 1674. The investigation doesn't resume with a historian. It resumes with a construction crew. King Charles II is on the throne. The Tower of London is undergoing renovations. A specific stone staircase leading to the Whitechapel is scheduled for demolition. It is a part of the tower that has not been touched in centuries. Workmen take up their pickaxes. They pull down the heavy stone steps. The staircase is ancient, medieval, built as a solid block. And underneath it, they find something. First, just rubble. Then a rotted piece of wood. The foreman leans in. He clears the dust. The wood is not a plank. It is the lid of a small wooden chest. They pry it open. Inside are not jewels, not documents. Inside are the bones of 2 small children. This is the moment. The paper trail was a lie, but the ground remembers. The conspiracy, so perfect in its destruction of parchment, so meticulous in its control of the narrative, had made a mistake. They had destroyed the written evidence, but they had forgotten to destroy the bodies. Or had they? The news explodes. 1674, 200 years after the crime, the bodies have been found. King Charles II, a king obsessed with his own legitimacy, seizes this moment. This is not an investigation for him. It is a coronation. He declares, by royal decree, that these are the bones of the princes, Edward and Richard. The case is closed. The Tudor story, the story of the evil uncle and the murder, is true. It has been physically, forensically proven. He orders a magnificent white marble sarcophagus designed by Sir Christopher Wren himself. He has the bones placed inside with a Latin inscription and entombed with full royal honors in the one place reserved for kings, Westminster Abbey. And there they lie, the final tactile proof of the Tudor lie. The story is over. The mystery is solved. Or is it? The bones were not analyzed. They were proclaimed. They were found, and within days they were locked in a marble tomb. There was no coroner's report, no pathologist, no examination. They were a political discovery, not a scientific one. The lid on that marble sarcophagus is just as final, just as silent as the original pact. The bones and the secret are buried again, deeper this time. Buried under the full weight of the crown, the church, and 500 years of official history. The trail goes cold again for another 250 years. Until 1933, the 20th century. A new age of science, an age of skepticism. The world has changed. The Dean of Westminster Abbey, under immense academic pressure, agrees to do what King Charles II did not. He agrees to open the box. 1933. The stone lid is lifted. The world holds its breath. This is the moment science will finally kill the conspiracy. A team, led by a pathologist and an anatomist, carefully removes the contents. The press, the public, they expect a simple confirmation. And at first, that's what it seems to be. The bones are indeed those of two children, one older, one younger. The anatomist estimates their ages are, roughly, consistent with 12 and 9. It seems to be the princes. The Tudor story, the story of the murder and the quick burial, appears to be correct. The case is closed again. But wait, if you are an investigator, you don't just look at what fits. You look at what doesn't. And as the scientists looked closer, the case didn't close. It shattered. The report, the 1933 forensic report, is a mess. First, the skeletons were incomplete. Second, they couldn't determine a definitive cause of death. But third, and this is the detail that contaminate all the evidence, they found other bones, mixed in with the remains, with the bones of animals. This was not a clean burial. This was a pit, a dumping ground. The box contained not just the two children, but other material. It was a contaminated, compromised, chaotic scene. The 1933 investigation, with the primitive tools at its disposal, could not confirm anything. It could not confirm gender. It could not confirm with certainty that these two skeletons were even related. It could not confirm a cause of death. All it confirmed was that two children of roughly the right age had been dumped in a box with animal parts and buried under a staircase. Faced with this inconclusive, messy, contaminated evidence, what did the establishment do? They did what the establishment always does. They declared the case satisfactorily closed. They said the bones were consistent with the princes, and they put them back into the marble tomb, back into the darkness. They sealed the lid again. The greatest chance to solve the mystery, the moment of physical proof, was lost. It was a failure. The 1933 analysis didn't solve the mystery. It just made the evidence worse. And for 90 years, that's where the investigation ends. In failure, in ambiguity, in a tomb that no one is allowed to open. Until today. Now we are in the 21st century. We are in the age of forensic science. That 1933 report, by today's standards, it's medieval. We now have tools they could not have dreamed of. We have carbon-14 dating to pinpoint the decade of death. We have stable isotope analysis to tell us where the children grew up. We have DNA. DNA, the ultimate objective witness. From a single tooth, a fleck of bone, we could answer everything. We could end the 500-year mystery. We could prove definitively, are these the princes? Yes or no? Are they related to each other? Yes or no? Do they share mitochondrial DNA with the line of Richard III? Yes or no? We could even, perhaps, find clues in the bone, traces of minerals that point to the Dark Pact, the alchemical medical hypothesis. We have the questions. We have the technology. We have the bones sitting right there in a marble box in Westminster Abbey. So, we test them. For decades, historians, scientists, and investigators like Philippa Langley have been formally petitioning. A simple, polite, scientific request. Not to desecrate the tomb. Just for one tiny, non-destructive sample. A single tooth. That's all it would take. One tooth. To solve the greatest murder mystery in British history. The request has been sent to the two institutions that have the key. The only two. The Dean of Westminster Abbey and the Crown, Her Majesty the Queen. And for decades, the answer has come back. The answer is no. The answer is a polite, firm, and absolute refusal. And that is the smoking gun. That is the discovery. The discovery is not a skeleton. The discovery is not a document. The discovery is a closed door. Think about this. Why? Why would the Crown and the Church refuse to solve this? Why would they not want to know? Why would they protect the ambiguity? There is only one logical, investigative answer. You only refuse to run a test when you are terrified of the result. You don't refuse if the test might prove the Tudor story true. You don't refuse if the test might prove the princes escaped. You only refuse if you suspect the test will prove something else. Something dark. Something foundational. Something that implicates the very establishment, the very crown, in a secret that is worse than the murder. The refusal to test the bones in 2024 is the exact same act as Henry VII burning the Titulus Regius in 1485. The Dark Pact was never broken. The conspiracy is not historical. It is active. The conspiracy holds. The door remains locked. The silence that began in 1483 continues. So, what is the legacy of this perfect crime? Richard III died at Bosworth. He was buried in a shallow grave, his body lost for 500 years. His reputation was murdered far more effectively than his nephew's, defined, forever, by the propaganda of the men who defeated him. Henry VII, the victor, the man who benefited from the silence, he built a dynasty. The entire, glorious, bloody reign of the Tudors. Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth I. All of it was built on this foundational, unexamined secret. The Dark Pact worked. And the victims? The boys? Edward and Richard? They were erased. They were denied a life, and then they were denied a death. They were transformed from human beings into a political ghost story, a tool, a piece of narrative currency used to secure a crown. They remain, to this day, prisoners, not of the tower, but of a marble box in Westminster Abbey. Their silence, enforced by the very institutions they were born to lead. So let's be clear. Let's look back at the myths we have been fed, and let's destroy them, one by one. Myth number 1. We know Richard III killed them. We know nothing of the sort. There is zero contemporary evidence. There is only a story, written 30 years later by his enemy's employee. Myth number 2. The case is simple. The case is the opposite of simple. The mother's behavior, the Christmas Pact, proves a complex negotiation. The victor's behavior, the burning of all records, proves a cover-up. Myth number 3. The bones in the abbey solved the case. This is the greatest lie of all. The bones, untested, unverified, and contaminated, are not a solution. They are a barrier. They are the second lock on the door. They are the physical symbol of the conspiracy, a 300-year-old prop used to reinforce the 500-year-old lie. So why does this matter? Who cares? It was 500 years ago. They are all dust. It matters because the lie is still working. It matters because the Dark Pact is not just a theory about 1483. It is a living, breathing mechanism of power. Today, the refusal of the Crown and the Church to allow a simple, scientific, harmless DNA test is the final proof. If the test proved the boys were murdered by Richard, the Crown would celebrate. It would vindicate their official story. If the test proved the bones weren't the princes, that they escaped, it would be the greatest historical discovery of the century. You only refuse, you only lock that door, if you are terrified the test will prove the third option, the Dark Pact. You refuse if you suspect the DNA will show a horrifying, inconvenient truth. What if the bones aren't related? What if they are the bones of 2 random children, used as a prop in 1674 to create the lie? Or, what if the test proves something worse? What if it proves the Dark Pact hypothesis? What if it confirms that the foundation of the modern British monarchy, the glorious Tudor dynasty, the line that leads to today, was founded on a conspiracy to hide an act of unspeakable, ritualistic, occult horror? What if the truth is so dark, so foundational, that it cannot be spoken aloud? History, you see, is not the past. It is the story we tell about the past. And sometimes, the most powerful institutions in the world have the most to fear from the truth. The official story of the princes in the tower is not a tragedy. It is a masterpiece of propaganda. A 500-year-old wall built to hide a secret. The question, the real question, is not what happened to those boys 5 centuries ago. The real question is, why are we still forbidden from knowing?